Dungeon Daddy Rick here. This is the final part of our Ghost by adventure with Umazuman, the Heron who we've been kind of exploring his post-death experiences and how he's been working to try to sever some of the ties that kind of keep him bound to the material realm. And he really had a rough time with that. So one of the things that we're going to do is we are going to compare our successes and failures. So where we left off, let's see, Zoom had just gone through, the last thing, he was thinking back to kind of the final fight, not a physical fight, but an emotional fight between himself and his now former lover, Trill. And the one that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The one that caused them to separate and be no longer betrothed. So following that, once again, in sort of that dreamlike way, things start to shift around him. Again, it doesn't feel unnatural. He doesn't even really notice that things are changing like that. It just sort of happens. And he finds himself in a tavern, a familiar-looking tavern, but instead of being kind of, the normal bustling and people, really noisy, just what you would expect from a tavern, right? It is covered in spider webs and dust, and seems like it has not been used in quite some time. And so what we do now is we are going to build dice pools based on successes versus the failures from what we've already rolled. So he had 7 successes, 8 failures, and 8 spite. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll our first set, which is our successes. Alright, so we got a 3, a 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, and a 1. Okay, so we had 4 successes and 3 failures. Let me write that down. Alright, and then we're going to roll 8 d4s for the failures. And we're going to compare that. Oh man. Okay, so we got 1, 4, another 1, 2, 4, 2, 2, and a 3. Okay, so despite overwhelming odds, because I guess not really overwhelming odds, because he only had 1 more failure than he had a success. This time he had 3 successes and 5 failures. So what we do is we then take the spite. So we're going to subtract the spite from our successes and failures, and yeah, it would put him negative. So our faithful hero does not manage to sever the ties well enough, which, as I said in, I believe, both sessions, but definitely in the first one, we already know, because of the way that events played out in that marathon one-shot, Zoom comes back from the dead. So yeah, he fails to sever his connection and move on to the afterlife. And how I want to kind of visualize this, because we know from that one shot that DM Jeremy from Old Men Rolling Dice ran for us over on the Vactair channel for our birthday bash. Basically what happened is, in the middle of this fight, Zoom was killed by an eye ray from this beholder, went to the afterlife where he met St. Cuthbert, who Zoom, being kind of the oddball southern kind of guy that he is, always calls him Mr. Cuthbert. because he really didn't believe in gods. He wasn't wouldn't say he was an atheist, but more like a strong agnostic kind of what's the word? Skeptic. So, he'd seen some things that maybe they're real, but he also wasn't totally convinced. But in meeting Mr. Cuthbert, sort of how this looks to our point of view is the tavern door opens and there's a bright white light into which Zoom makes his way very casually, and he disappears. Once he steps out of the doorway, there's no silhouette, no nothing, and where we find him seemingly momentarily after is back in the I forget how I described it now. Back in the room that he was in for his second tether, I believe, where there was the shadowy figure, and he reappears with now kind of the Urukai handprint on his face as he got bitch slapped by Mr. Cuthbert, and finds himself back amongst his party, where they then do battle with this undead beholder. So, that is the end of our story. While, you would think that kind of the goal of this would be to sever the ties, move on, cross over. In this case, I think it's what was best for Zoom, what was meant to be. Aside from the fact that we know it was meant to be because it already happened partially, but this is kind of like our exploration of the story. But as I said, I wanted to give kind of my thoughts on this game. I mentioned previously that I don't remember seeing anywhere in here really an explanation for how many successes or failures. It may be similar to some other Caltrop core games. Mainly the biggest one that I can think of would be Her Odyssey, which, if you haven't heard of, it's, like I said, another Caltrop core game. Check out our friends Potions and Potpourri. They did a couple of fantastic solo play episodes of that, and they kind of talk through the mechanics. But basically, it is a little bit up to you, and I think that's the way this game is as well, how many times you want to attempt. If it was like, well, I got a success, I'm just going to move on, then you could do that. And potentially, if you had some failures later on, that could be a bad thing. I kind of would like a little bit more guidance on that, but at the same time, having that looseness, being a little bit less rigid is nice, because that lets you adapt things, and that's just kind of my personal preference on it. But all in all, I think this is a really fun game. I think it has the potential. This got a little bit heavy on the fifis. That's part of why I didn't do this all in one session, was it was a little bit much for a Sunday morning whenever I was recording it on stream. And so I just decided, let's do this in multiple parts. We'll split it up a little bit. But yeah, this could be a really fun casual game, a way to kind of explore a character and see, say maybe you had a character that you want to play. You could sort of go through this and play their death, and that would let you flesh out their backstory a little bit. You could do something like I did, where you've got an established character, which, he wasn't that established because I've only played him a couple of times ever. But, still it let me kind of flesh out that backstory. Or you could just do whatever you want. You could play a character that you don't ever intend to play anywhere else. That this will be their one and only time that you actually get to embody that character. But either way, I think it's really fun. We're not really a podcast where we do a lot of ratings, but I would definitely recommend this one. So I'm not going to give it a number of stars. I'm just going to say this is a game that I would recommend. There's a link in the description to it if you want to go check it out yourself. And let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.